The morning sun was just starting to peek over the rooftops when Martha Henderson marched down the sidewalk with her clipboard pressed against her chest. She was wearing her bright yellow HOA vest, the one she had specially ordered with the words, Community Standards Officer, printed on the back. Her eyes locked onto the green trash can sitting at the end of Harold Mitchell's driveway, and her lips curled into a mean little smile. She looked left. She looked right. The street was empty. Perfect. Martha walked right up to that trash can, placed both hands on its side, and pushed with all her strength. The can toppled over with a loud crash, and garbage bags spilled across the driveway. Coffee grounds, old newspapers, and banana peels scattered everywhere like confetti at a parade nobody wanted to attend. But what Martha did not notice was the tiny red light blinking from inside the decorative rock sitting in Harold's flower bed. She did not see the small camera lens hidden behind the plastic leaves of the fake fern near his garage, and she definitely did not notice the thin wire running from the trash can lid to something buried just beneath the gravel. Because this was no ordinary trash can. This was the trap, and Martha Henderson had just stepped right into it. 3 seconds later, a sprinkler head popped up from the ground and shot a stream of ice-cold water directly at Martha's face. She screamed so loud that dogs started barking 3 streets away. Her clipboard flew into the air. Her perfectly styled hair fell flat against her head like wet spaghetti, and her expensive white sneakers turned into soggy sponges. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the sound coming from Harold's front porch. It was laughter. Deep, joyful, belly-shaking laughter from a 72-year-old man who had finally gotten his revenge. "Good morning, Martha," Harold called out, waving cheerfully from his rocking chair. "Lovely day for a shower, isn't it?" Martha stood there, dripping wet, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She wanted to scream. She wanted to threaten. She wanted to call the police, the mayor, and probably the President of the United States. But before she could say a single word, Harold held up his phone and smiled. "Don't worry," he said. "I got the whole thing on camera. All 12 times you knocked over my trash can. Every single one." Martha's face went as white as a ghost. Then it turned red. Then it turned a shade of purple that Harold had never seen on a human being before. What happened next would change everything for Maple Grove Drive. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to the beginning. Back to 6 months ago, when Harold Mitchell first moved into the house at 247 Maple Grove Drive, and when his troubles with the HOA queen herself first began. Harold Mitchell had lived in the same small apartment in downtown Chicago for 43 years. He had raised his son Danny there after his wife passed away when Danny was just 5 years old. He had worked as a mechanic at the same auto shop for 38 years, fixing engines and changing oil until his hands knew the inside of a car better than some doctors know the human body. When Harold finally retired, Danny surprised him with the most wonderful gift a son could give. Danny had become very successful, running his own technology company in California. He bought his father a beautiful little house in the quiet suburb of Maple Grove, just 20 minutes from his own home. "You spent your whole life taking care of me, Dad," Danny had said, handing Harold the keys. "Now let me take care of you." Harold had cried that day. He was not ashamed to admit it. After all those years of hard work, of early mornings and late nights, of skipping vacations and saving every penny so Danny could go to college, his son had remembered. His son had come back to say thank you in the biggest way possible. The house was perfect. It had a little front porch with a rocking chair, a backyard with a lemon tree, and a garage where Harold could tinker with old engines just for fun. The neighbors seemed friendly enough. There was Betty Wilson, the retired schoolteacher next door who always had fresh cookies. There was the young couple across the street, Marcus and Jessica, who had just had their first baby. And there was old George Patterson at the end of the block, who loved to talk about his days in the Navy. For the first 2 weeks, Harold felt like he had found heaven on earth. Then he met Martha Henderson. It was a Tuesday morning when Harold first laid eyes on the woman who would make his life miserable. He was out front, planting some daisies in his flower bed, when a shadow fell over him. He looked up to see a tall woman with silver hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She was wearing that yellow vest, holding that clipboard, and frowning like she had just tasted something sour. "You must be the new resident," she said. It was not a question, it was an accusation. "That's me," Harold said, wiping his hands on his jeans and offering a friendly smile. "Harold Mitchell. Nice to meet you." Martha did not shake his hand. Instead, she looked at her clipboard and made a clicking sound with her tongue. "Mr. Mitchell, I am Martha Henderson, president of the Maple Grove Homeowners Association. I see here that you have not yet submitted your landscaping proposal for approval." Harold blinked. "My, what now?" "Your landscaping proposal." Section 4.2 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that all exterior modifications, including but not limited to flower beds, shrubs, and decorative elements, must be submitted in writing and approved by the board before implementation. Harold looked down at the 3 small daisy plants in his hands. "You mean these little flowers? Those unapproved botanical additions?" "Yes." Harold laughed. He thought she was joking. Nobody could be this serious about 3 tiny flowers. But Martha Henderson was not joking. She did not even smile. "I will give you 48 hours to submit the proper paperwork," she said, making a note on her clipboard. "Failure to comply will result in a $50 fine. Have a pleasant day." And with that, she turned on her heel and marched away, leaving Harold standing there with his mouth hanging open and dirt all over his hands. That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Harold learned that Martha Henderson had her nose in everyone's business. She measured grass with a ruler and sent fines if it grew over 4 inches. She monitored paint colors with a special chart and had once made an elderly couple repaint their entire house because the shade of blue was 3 degrees off from the approved palette. She timed how long Christmas decorations stayed up and sent angry letters the moment they passed January 15th. The whole neighborhood lived in fear of Martha and her clipboard. But Harold was different from the others. Harold had spent his whole life solving problems. When an engine would not start, he did not give up. He found the issue and fixed it. When life knocked him down, he got back up. He had raised a son on his own, worked double shifts, and never complained. He was not about to let some lady with a clipboard push him around. So Harold did something revolutionary. He actually read the HOA bylaws, all 247 pages of them. He read them with a cup of coffee every morning, making notes in the margins, highlighting important sections, and looking for anything that might help him. What he found was interesting. The bylaws were full of rules, yes, but they were also full of loopholes. Little gaps in the language that a clever person could use to their advantage. Harold smiled as he read. All those years of reading car manuals and repair guides had prepared him for this moment. The first battle came over his mailbox. Martha sent him a notice that his mailbox was not in compliance with community standards. It was painted green, and apparently the approved colors were black, white, or brown. Harold checked the bylaws. Section 7.3 stated that mailbox colors must be approved neutral tones. But it did not define what a neutral tone was. And technically, a dark forest green could be considered a neutral color in certain design contexts. Harold wrote a 3-page letter explaining his position, citing color theory and design principles. He requested a formal hearing with the HOA board. He brought a color wheel as evidence. The board was so confused by his presentation that they ruled in his favor just to make him stop talking. Martha was furious. The second battle came over his garden gnome. Harold bought a little ceramic gnome at a garage sale. It was about 6 inches tall, had a red hat, and held a tiny fishing pole. He thought it was adorable and placed it next to his daisies, which he had finally gotten approved after submitting a 12-page proposal with diagrams. Martha sent him a fine for unauthorized decorative statuary. Harold checked the bylaws again. Section 5.1 banned statues, sculptures, and large decorative items over 18 inches in height. His gnome was 6 inches tall. It was not a statue. It was a gnome, and it was well under the height limit. He won that battle too. Martha started to hate Harold Mitchell with a passion she had never felt before. Here was this quiet old man, this newcomer, who dared to challenge her authority, who dared to read the bylaws and use them against her, who dared to smile and wave at her every single morning like he did not have a care in the world. It drove her absolutely crazy. That is when the trash can incidents began. The first time it happened, Harold thought it was an accident. Maybe a dog had knocked it over. Maybe the wind had been stronger than usual. He picked up his garbage, cleaned up the mess, and thought nothing of it. The second time, he was more suspicious. There had been no wind that night, no stray dogs in the neighborhood. But still, he gave the benefit of the doubt. By the fifth time, Harold knew something was wrong. The trash can was being knocked over every single Tuesday night, right after he put it out for Wednesday morning collection. And it was always the same pattern. The can was pushed over onto its side, spilling garbage all over his driveway. Harold decided to investigate. He set up an old baby monitor that Danny had left behind, pointing it at the trash can from his living room window. He stayed up late, drinking decaf coffee and watching the little screen. At exactly 11:30 at night, a figure appeared on the screen. A tall figure with silver hair and a yellow vest. Martha Henderson. She walked up to his trash can, looked around to make sure no one was watching, and pushed it over with both hands. Then she smiled, actually smiled, and walked away. Harold could not believe his eyes. The president of the Homeowners Association, the woman who lectured everyone about community standards and neighborhood pride, was deliberately vandalizing his property. Harold felt angry. Then he felt hurt. Then he felt something else entirely. He felt determined. If Martha Henderson wanted to play dirty, Harold Mitchell was going to show her how a master played the game. Over the next few weeks, Harold did his research. He learned about motion-activated cameras. He studied sprinkler systems and timing mechanisms. He watched online videos about harmless pranks and defensive measures. He even took a trip to the electronics store, where a helpful young employee showed him all the latest gadgets. Harold Mitchell, the 72-year-old retired mechanic, was building a trap. But not just any trap. A trap that would catch Martha in the act, embarrass her in front of the whole neighborhood, and finally put an end to her reign of terror. He worked on it for 3 weeks, installing cameras in places no one would ever notice. He rigged his trash can with sensors that could detect when someone touched it. He set up a special sprinkler system that would activate the moment the can was tipped over. And then he waited. Tuesday night came. Harold sat in his living room with a cup of warm milk and a satisfied smile. His phone was connected to all the cameras. His finger was ready to record everything. At exactly 11:30, right on schedule, Martha Henderson appeared on his screen. She walked up to the trash can with that same mean little smile on her face. She placed her hands on the side. She pushed. And all of Harold's planning, all of his hard work, all of his patience and determination came together in one glorious moment. The sprinklers activated. The cameras recorded. And Martha Henderson screamed. But as Harold walked out onto his porch, laughing and waving, something unexpected happened. Martha did not run away in shame. She did not apologize or admit defeat. Instead, she pointed her dripping finger directly at Harold and shouted words that made his blood run cold. "You think this is over, old man? I am going to destroy you. I am going to make sure you lose that house. I am going to make your life so miserable that you will wish you had never moved to Maple Grove Drive." And then she pulled out her phone and made a call that would change everything. "Hello? Yes, this is Martha Henderson. I need to report an assault. An elderly man just attacked me with his sprinkler system. I want him arrested immediately." Harold's smile faded as he heard police sirens in the distance, getting closer and closer. What had he done? And more importantly, what was going to happen next? Now tell me, dear audience, where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure you are ready for Chapter 2, where everything gets even more intense. The red and blue lights of the police car bounced off the houses on Maple Grove Drive like a terrifying light show. Harold stood on his porch, his heart beating so fast he could feel it in his throat. The warm feeling of victory that had filled his chest just moments ago was now replaced by cold, heavy fear. Two police officers stepped out of the car. One was a young man with a serious face. The other was an older woman with kind eyes and gray streaks in her dark hair. They walked toward Harold's house while Martha Henderson stood in the middle of the street, dripping wet and pointing dramatically. "That's him," Martha shouted. "That's the man who assaulted me. I want him arrested right now. I am the president of this homeowners association, and I demand justice." The young officer looked at Martha, then at Harold, then back at Martha. He seemed confused. Harold could not blame him. It was almost midnight, and there was a soaking wet woman in a yellow vest screaming about sprinklers and assault. "Ma'am, please calm down," the older officer said, holding up her hand. "Let's figure out what happened here." "Sir, can you tell us your side of the story?" Harold took a deep breath. His hands were shaking, but he made his voice as steady as he could. "Officers, my name is Harold Mitchell. I am 72 years old. I have lived in this house for 6 months, and I have never been in trouble with the law in my entire life." He paused to swallow the lump in his throat. "That woman has been knocking over my trash can every Tuesday night for the past 2 months. I have video evidence on my phone. Tonight, I set up a sprinkler system to catch her in the act. That is all that happened. Nobody was assaulted, nobody was hurt, she just got wet." "He's lying," Martha shrieked. "He set a trap for me. That's illegal. That's dangerous. I could have been seriously injured." The young officer was writing things down in his little notebook. The older officer, whose name tag read Officer Rodriguez, walked closer to Harold. "Mr. Mitchell, you said you have video evidence?" Harold nodded and pulled out his phone. "I have footage of her knocking over my trash can 12 different times, and I have footage from tonight, showing exactly what happened." Officer Rodriguez took the phone and pressed play. Harold watched her face as she viewed the video. He saw her eyebrows go up. He saw her lips pressed together. He saw something that looked almost like a smile trying to escape. She showed the phone to the young officer. His reaction was similar. They exchanged a look that seemed to say something Harold could not quite understand. "Ma'am," Officer Rodriguez said, turning to Martha. "This video clearly shows you deliberately tipping over this man's trash can and then getting sprayed by a motion-activated sprinkler. That's not assault. That's a landscaping feature." "But he set a trap," Martha insisted. "He was trying to humiliate me. You were trespassing on his property and vandalizing his trash can." The young officer pointed out. "If anyone should be pressing charges here, it's Mr. Mitchell." Martha's face went through about 15 different expressions in 3 seconds. Shock, anger, disbelief, fear, more anger, and finally, a kind of desperate pleading. "You don't understand," she said, her voice suddenly much quieter. "I am the HOA president. I was just doing my job. I was checking compliance. His trash can was out too early. It's against the rules." Officer Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "So you check compliance by pushing trash cans over at 11:30 at night?" Martha had no answer for that. "Mr. Mitchell," Officer Rodriguez said, "do you want to press charges for vandalism and trespassing?" Harold looked at Martha. She was standing there in her soggy yellow vest, her hair plastered to her head, her makeup running down her face. She looked small somehow. Smaller than she had ever looked before. And despite everything she had done, despite all the fines and the harassment and the knocked-over trash cans, Harold felt something he did not expect. He felt sorry for her. "No," Harold said slowly. "No, I don't want to press charges. I just want to be left alone. I just want to live my life in peace." The officers nodded. They gave Martha a stern warning about trespassing and vandalism. They told her that if there were any more incidents, she would be arrested. And then they drove away, leaving Harold and Martha standing on opposite sides of the street. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Martha turned and walked away, her wet shoes making squeaking sounds on the pavement. She did not look back. Harold went inside and sat down heavily in his favorite chair. His hands were still shaking, his heart was still racing. But somewhere deep inside, there was a tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, this whole nightmare was finally over. He was wrong. The next morning, Harold woke up to the sound of his phone ringing. It was Danny calling from California. "Dad, are you okay? What happened?" "I got like 15 text messages from neighbors saying the police were at your house last night." Harold sighed and explained the whole story. The trash cans, the trap, the sprinklers, the police. By the end of it, Danny was laughing so hard, he could barely breathe. "Dad, you are officially my hero," Danny said between gasps of laughter. "I can't believe you actually did that. I wish I could have seen her face." "It's not funny, son," Harold said, though he was smiling a little. "I was really scared. I thought they were going to arrest me. But they didn't, and now you have video proof of everything. She can't bother you anymore, Dad. You won." Harold wished he could believe that. But he had seen the look in Martha's eyes before she walked away. That was not the look of someone who had given up. That was the look of someone planning their next move. For the next few days, everything was quiet, too quiet. Martha did not knock on his door. She did not send any fines. She did not even walk past his house during her daily patrols. It was like she had vanished completely. Harold started to relax. Maybe Danny was right. Maybe it really was over. Then Thursday morning came. Harold was sitting on his porch, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper, when he noticed something strange. Betty Wilson, the nice retired teacher who lived next door, walked past his house without saying hello. She looked straight ahead, her face tight and uncomfortable, and hurried away like she was being chased. Then Marcus and Jessica, the young couple across the street, did the same thing. They were pushing their baby in a stroller, and when Harold waved at them, they pretended not to see him. They actually turned their heads away. Even old George Patterson, who never passed up a chance to tell a Navy story, crossed to the other side of the street to avoid Harold's house. Something was very wrong. Harold put down his newspaper and walked over to George's house. He knocked on the door. George opened it just a crack, his face looking guilty and afraid. "George, what's going on?" Harold asked. "Why is everyone avoiding me?" George looked around nervously, like he was afraid someone might see them talking. "I'm sorry, Harold," he whispered. "I really am. But Martha called an emergency HOA meeting last night. She told everyone about what happened with the sprinklers, but she changed the story." Harold felt his stomach drop. "Changed it how?" "She said you've been harassing her for months. She said you've been threatening her and following her around the neighborhood. She said you're dangerous, Harold. She said you're mentally unstable and everyone should stay away from you for their own safety." Harold could not believe what he was hearing. "That's a lie. None of that is true. I have video evidence that proves she was the one causing trouble." George nodded sadly. "I know, Harold. I believe you. But Martha, she's powerful. She's been running this neighborhood for 15 years. People are scared of her. They don't want to get on her bad side. She made everyone sign a petition to have you removed from the neighborhood." "A petition? Can she even do that?" "She says there's a clause in the HOA bylaws that allows the board to revoke someone's membership for conduct detrimental to the community. If you're removed from the HOA, you'll face huge fines, thousands of dollars, maybe even a lawsuit to force you to sell your house." Harold leaned against the doorframe, feeling dizzy. His son had bought him this house as a gift. This was supposed to be his peaceful retirement home, and now Martha Henderson was trying to take it all away. "I'm sorry," George said again. "I really am. I wish there was something I could do." He closed the door, leaving Harold standing alone on the porch. That night, Harold called Danny and told him everything. Danny was furious. "Dad, this is ridiculous. She can't do this. We'll get a lawyer. We'll fight this." "I don't want to fight anymore," Harold said quietly. "I'm tired, Danny. I'm 72 years old. I just wanted a nice quiet place to spend my last years. I didn't want any of this." "You're not giving up," Danny said firmly. "I won't let you give up. You taught me never to quit, remember? When things got hard, you always said to keep pushing. You said that problems are just puzzles waiting to be solved." Harold smiled through the tears that were forming in his eyes. His son had grown into such a good man. He had raised him right. "Okay, son, I won't give up, but I don't know what to do. Martha has turned the whole neighborhood against me. Everyone believes her lies. Then we need to show them the truth. You said you have video evidence, right? 12 videos of her knocking over your trash can?" "Yes, but nobody will watch them. Nobody will even talk to me." Danny was quiet for a moment. Harold could almost hear him thinking, "Dad, what if we didn't need them to watch the videos? What if we could show them the truth in a way they couldn't ignore?" "What do you mean?" "I have an idea. It might be a little crazy, but I think it could work. Do you trust me?" Harold did not even hesitate. "With my life, son. With my life." "Good. Here's what we're going to do." The next morning, Harold woke up with a new sense of purpose. Danny's plan was risky, but it just might work. It would require perfect timing, careful planning, and a little bit of luck. But Harold Mitchell had never backed down from a challenge, and he was not about to start now. The first step was to request an official HOA hearing. According to the bylaws, any member facing disciplinary action had the right to present their case before the full board and any community members who wished to attend. Harold filled out the paperwork and submitted it to the HOA office. He made sure to follow every rule, cross every T, and dot every I. He would not give Martha any excuse to deny his request. The hearing was scheduled for the following Saturday at the community center. While Harold waited for Saturday to arrive, Danny flew in from California. He brought with him 3 large suitcases full of equipment and a smile that reminded Harold of Christmas morning. "What is all this stuff?" Harold asked, watching his son set up computers and screens and wires all over the living room. "This, Dad, is how we're going to win." Danny spent the next 3 days working on his project. He barely slept. He ate his meals while typing on his keyboard. Harold tried to help, but most of the technology was beyond his understanding. All he could do was bring his son coffee and sandwiches and trust that everything would work out. Friday night arrived. The hearing was less than 12 hours away. Harold could not sleep. He kept walking around the house, looking out the windows, checking and rechecking the equipment that Danny had prepared. "Dad, you need to rest," Danny said gently. "Tomorrow is going to be a big day." "I know, I'm scared, son. What if this doesn't work? What if Martha wins? What if I lose everything?" Danny put his hand on his father's shoulder. "Do you remember what you told me when I was 8 years old and the kids at school were bullying me? When I wanted to stop going to school because I was so afraid?" Harold thought back to that time. Danny had been such a small boy, quiet and shy. Some of the bigger kids had made his life miserable. "I told you that bullies only have power when you let them scare you," Harold said slowly. "I told you that the truth is always stronger than lies, and kindness is always stronger than cruelty. And you were right," Danny said. "You told me to be brave, to tell the truth, and to never stop being kind, even when other people were mean. That's exactly what we're going to do tomorrow. We're going to be brave, we're going to tell the truth, and we're going to show this neighborhood what kindness really looks like." Harold hugged his son tight. In that moment, he was not afraid anymore. He had raised a good man. Whatever happened tomorrow, he had already won the most important battle of his life. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear. The sun was shining, birds were singing. It was the kind of beautiful day that made you believe anything was possible. The community center was packed. It seemed like every single person in Maple Grove had come to watch the hearing. Harold saw Betty Wilson sitting in the back row, looking uncomfortable. He saw Marcus and Jessica near the front, their baby sleeping in a carrier. He saw George Patterson standing against the wall, his arms crossed over his chest. And there, sitting at a long table at the front of the room, was Martha Henderson. She was wearing a crisp white blouse and a serious expression. Her clipboard was in front of her, and her gavel was in her hand. She looked confident. She looked powerful. She looked like someone who had already won. Harold walked to the front of the room and took his seat at a small table facing the board. Danny sat beside him, a laptop computer open in front of him. Martha banged her gavel. This hearing is now in session. We are here to discuss the matter of Harold Mitchell and his continued membership in the Maple Grove Homeowners Association. Mr. Mitchell has been accused of harassment, threatening behavior, and conduct detrimental to our community. How does Mr. Mitchell plead? Harold stood up. His knees were shaking, but his voice was strong. Not guilty, Madam President. Not guilty on all counts, and I have evidence to prove it. Martha smiled coldly. Very well. You may present your evidence. Harold nodded to Danny. His son pressed a button on the laptop, and suddenly the big screen at the front of the room came to life. Ladies and gentlemen, Harold said, for the past 2 months, Martha Henderson has been vandalizing my property. She has knocked over my trash can 12 times. She has done this secretly, at night, when she thought no one was watching. But I was watching, and I recorded everything. The first video began to play. There was Martha, walking up to Harold's trash can in the dark. There she was, pushing it over with both hands. There was the garbage, spilling all over the driveway. The room gasped. Then the second video played, and the third, and the fourth, all 12 videos, one after another, showing Martha Henderson committing vandalism over and over again. Martha's face turned bright red. She stood up and banged her gavel. This is an outrage. Those videos are fake. He doctored them to frame me. But Danny just smiled and pressed another button. These videos are not fake, he said calmly. They were recorded by 3 different cameras from 3 different angles. They have timestamps that match the police report from 4 nights ago. And they have already been reviewed by the police department, who confirmed they are authentic. The room was silent. Everyone was staring at Martha with new eyes. Eyes that saw her for what she really was. But Harold was not finished. I could stand here and ask you to punish Martha Henderson, he said, his voice quiet but clear. I could ask you to remove her from the HOA board. I could press charges and have her arrested for vandalism and harassment. But I am not going to do that. The room murmured in confusion. Even Danny looked surprised. I moved to Maple Grove because I wanted a peaceful life. I wanted neighbors I could trust and a community I could belong to. Martha tried to take that away from me, and I will admit that I wanted revenge. I set up that sprinkler system to embarrass her. I wanted to see her get what she deserved. Harold paused, looking around the room at all the faces watching him. But revenge is not the answer. My late wife, God rest her soul, used to say that kindness is like a boomerang. The kindness you throw out into the world will always come back to you. The cruelty you throw out will come back too. I think Martha has been throwing out cruelty for a very long time, and I think it has finally caught up with her. He turned to look directly at Martha. She was staring at him, her face pale, her hands shaking. Martha, I do not know why you are so angry all the time. I do not know what happened in your life to make you this way, but I forgive you. I forgive you for the trash cans. I forgive you for the lies you told about me. I forgive you for trying to take away my home. Martha's eyes filled with tears. For the first time since Harold had met her, she looked like a real person instead of a monster. All I ask, Harold continued, is that you try to be kinder. To me, to the neighbors, to yourself. This community could be a wonderful place if we all just treated each other with respect and compassion. Will you try to do that, Martha? The room was completely silent. Everyone was watching Martha, waiting to see what she would do. And then something amazing happened. Martha Henderson, the terror of Maple Grove Drive, the woman who had made everyone's life miserable for 15 years, began to cry. Not fake tears, not angry tears. Real tears that streamed down her face and dripped onto her clipboard. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I don't know why I do the things I do. I've been so lonely for so long. My husband left me 10 years ago. My children don't speak to me anymore. This HOA position is all I have. It makes me feel important. It makes me feel like I matter." She looked at Harold with red, puffy eyes. "You're right. I have been cruel. I have been throwing out anger and bitterness because that's all I have inside. But you showed me kindness when I least deserved it. You forgave me when you had every right to destroy me." Martha stood up slowly. She took off her yellow HOA vest and set it on the table. "I resign as president of the Maple Grove Homeowners Association, effective immediately, and I promise I will try to do better." The room erupted in applause. People were standing up, clapping, some of them crying. Betty Wilson rushed over to give Harold a hug. Marcus and Jessica were smiling and nodding. Even old George Patterson was wiping his eyes. Harold smiled and looked at his son. Danny was grinning from ear to ear, looking at his father with so much pride it made Harold's heart feel like it might burst. 3 months later, Maple Grove Drive was a different place. The grass was still cut to exactly 4 inches, and the mailboxes were still approved colors, but the atmosphere had completely changed. Neighbors waved at each other. They had barbecues and block parties. They helped each other with yard work and brought food when someone was sick. And Harold Mitchell, the 72-year-old retired mechanic who had just wanted a quiet retirement, had become the most beloved person in the neighborhood. But the biggest surprise of all was Martha Henderson. She had kept her promise. She started volunteering at the local senior center. She baked cookies for new families moving into the neighborhood. She even helped Harold plant a whole garden of daisies in his front yard, getting her hands dirty right alongside him. One sunny afternoon, Harold was sitting on his porch with a glass of lemonade when Martha walked up his driveway. She was carrying a small wrapped package. "I made you something," she said shyly, handing it to him. Harold unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a little ceramic gnome, about 6 inches tall, with a red hat and a tiny fishing pole. It looked exactly like the one that had caused so much trouble all those months ago. "I saw it at a garage sale," Martha said. "It made me think of you. I thought maybe it could be a symbol of how things used to be and how much they've changed." Harold felt tears prick his eyes. He set the gnome down next to the original one in his flower bed. "Thank you, Martha. This means more than you know." Martha smiled, a real smile that reached all the way to her eyes. "No, Harold, thank you. You taught me that it's never too late to change. It's never too late to choose kindness over cruelty. I spent 15 years making people miserable, and you showed me a better way in just one conversation." Harold stood up and did something that surprised them both. He gave Martha a hug. "That's what neighbors are for," he said. From inside the house, Danny watched through the window and smiled. His father had always been his hero, but never more than in this moment. The old man who had raised him with love and patience and endless kindness had done it again. He had taken an enemy and turned her into a friend. He had taken a neighborhood full of fear and filled it with hope. And all it had taken was a little forgiveness. That evening, the whole neighborhood gathered for a summer barbecue at Harold's house. There was laughter and music and more food than anyone could eat. Children played in the backyard while adults swapped stories and made plans for the future. Harold sat in his rocking chair, surrounded by friends, his son by his side, and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt like he was home. As the sun set over Maple Grove Drive, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Harold raised his glass of lemonade. To kindness, he said. May we always choose it, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. To kindness. Everyone cheered. And somewhere in the crowd, Martha Henderson cheered the loudest of all. Now tell me, dear audience, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to change. Remember, kindness is like a boomerang. Whatever you throw out into the world will always come back to you. So throw out love. Throw out compassion. Throw out forgiveness. And watch how your whole life transforms. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. And never underestimate the power of a 72-year-old man with a motion-activated sprinkler system.